Sonic X Shadow Generations is finally here after what feels like a decades-long wait of leaks and discussions. It feels great to say that after our last mainline Sonic game was just 2 years ago with Frontier. Firstly though, I will be talking about spoilers in this review at the timestamp below, so you've been warned. But anyway, it seems that the Sonic Resurgence era is about to begin, because this is the first game in 23 years to get an 80 score on Metacritic. That may not be much to an outsider, but the Sonic games have had a maximum of 75 for the last few years, and the fact that this game got an 80 is just insane. This all just makes me think back to Forces all those years ago when I played it for the first time. My intrigue for the Sonic universe was opened, and also there was a freaking online social media war happening about this game. I think that Forces was the game where Sonic was titled as pretty much a joke on lying to outsiders. From the horrific Boom series, going to a Fallen Sub-Soul player, to Forces and then Mania, which all fairness was pretty great, and then to Colors, Ultimates. You can see my opinions on that game from the video in the description below, and then to Frontiers where things picked up, but not enough fully to revive Sonic. But now the GOAT himself has arrived, saved the day with a remaster of one of the best Sonic games and a completely new Shadow game to attach to it. I'll admit that the CGI trailer got me interested, but the amount of hype, nostalgia, good storytelling that has gone into this game is honestly just mind-blowing to me. This is the year of Shadow, and Sega has made damn sure we know that. With the Sonic movie 3 releasing in December, Shadow is the face of attraction to YouTubers talking about McDonald's toy that has his face on it. This game has been surrounded by god-tier marketing, with also the promise of Keanu Reeves would be voicing Shadow in the movie DLC coming in December, and the fact that this game not only brings back the most emotional story in the franchise, but also the greatest villain. I believe that this game is definitely deserving of a round of applause, because after playing through it, I believe that this game is definitely deserving of a round of applause, because after playing it through, I can confidently say that this is a game that may be on the podium of one of the best Sonic games ever. But after saying all that, yep, here's my take on Sonic X Shadow Generation. Sonic Generations is on its own is a great story that celebrated the anniversary of the franchise, but its story is kinda the story is just dull and doesn't have much going on except some goofy joke. But Shadow Generations 100% made up for this, with enough juicy storytelling, lore, emotions and new context to keep the community chewing for years to come. And I'll admit, I didn't grow up with the adventure era and just know the important bits of it, but even I have to say that the things that came up in this story are just so well written. I've seen comments on videos saying Ian Flynn needs to stop cooking, but if he came up with this masterpiece, then I give my full approval on him just editing the entire Sonic lore. Questions like I've been asking, like where was Shadow during Generations, or where were Orbot and Cubot during Generations, and why is Shadow called Shadow, were all answered after an entire decade, and probably more if we look deeper into the story. But the thing I adored about this game is that it finally, mostly, wraps up the whole Maria, Gerald and Black Doom arc. I know it was finished sort of before, but I think it was fully wrapped up and closed in this game. Speaking of Black Doom, he was a great villain in my opinion. He looked visually menacing, or disgusting, your choice. His voice was menacing and his final forms were just sick. And then he died again. This game offered an expansion pack to his whole villain saga that we knew and saw in Shadow 05, with him returning somehow and then dying again. Also, can I just say that Doom Space Station, I don't know what to call it, looked hilarious. I tried to play hide and seek with it so I could get away from his staring eye. Marie and Gerald were probably the second characters who got a lot of screen time in this story, which I'm all here for, because the whole Maria and Shadow storyline is probably one of the most delicate and interesting story bits in the franchise. Needless to say though, Ian Flynn captured the image of Shadow's family very well here. Context for newcomers is given about their backstory, and the dynamic between Gerald and Shadow is kept the same, and Maria's character was surprisingly the wise person giving out all the guidance here, though the big bombshell came at the end where Shadow loses the pair again, and I'll be honest, I started crying here, but the orchestral music mixed with the final tear just hit me so hard. But if you know the context of this game and how rare it is to see a Shadow cry, you'll understand. However, if I do give one nitpick, why weren't the levels in the future explained? Like, I know they were sort of in an NPC dialogue, but I think we needed more explanation. But surely this breaks the timeline more than Eggman just slowly going insane. But I think I could do a podcast literally talking about the story to summarize all my thoughts, but overall, I think this was a really emotional story conclusion and addition to an already great game and its slightly story. Sonic Frontiers, if you ask me, was more of a test demo for any future open world Sonic titles, and Sega delivered when it came to this game. One of my biggest gripes about Frontiers was the fact that we had a lot of pop-in, and this game was spotless from it. The realism factor was lowered a lot, which made it a lot more enjoyable for me. Because I think Sonic is meant to be a cartoon, not the Fortnite getting realistic graphics every year. But seriously, the graphics in this game are incredible. The level that showcases that the most is Sunset Height, which when you start the level, the sunset, the water's reflection, and the realistic fire just looks gobsmacking better than before. Frontiers was left in the dust when it came to the visuals department. But going back to the hub world, Shadow was left in a timeless limbo like Sonic Gens and has to get out. Different story, same scenario. The original Sonic Gens didn't have any hub world except the musical notes and the collection room. However, Shadow Gens have a ton of collectibles, vaults, chests, chest keys, boss keys, not to mention the platforming bits in the hub world. Different enemies are found in different sections depending on where you are, the platforming pieces being different and unique to the game they are from, and 96 or 80 bolts that you can spend hours collecting to help all boss and Q-bots in a very rage-worthy challenge because it took me an hour just to find a single bolt. Chaos Control, the slowdown mechanic, acts as a fast travel system between sections on the map. Too bad they have to destroy enemies to activate it. I will say that there are a couple of assets used from Frontiers here because there were points where I had some serious deja vu flashbacks when finding unexpected chests. I do appreciate now how Shadow Gens tries to feel like an expansion to the base game, because all the challenging gates, boss gates, the HUD, and the levels are all inspired by it. The game map is divided into 5 sections, each representing the different time zone that you can explore. In each section, there are 3 castles where you'll encounter side bosses. Getting into these castles involves some annoying platforming challenges. They don't have to complete every time you want to face a boss, but they are still quite annoying. There is a map included similar to the one in Frontiers, but unfortunately it doesn't have any markers to guide you. As a result, you have to often navigate without clear directions, relying mainly on an icon or shadow to help you find the way. But overall, there is a lot to do in the hub world because you can access all the levels, challenges, practice platforming, and talk with NPC, then go through the boss fights. Each hold an amazing experience. Sonic 06 and Forces. What do these games have in common? An amazing concept and an interesting idea for a villain. But 06's villain came back due to fan feedback, and to my delight, looked better than ever. Adventure 2's villain returned as well, more visually disgusting than ever, and still making me gag a little talking about him. And finally, Sonic Heroes villain returned with a boss fight that I adored because it was using the new Doom powers. They were the Wild Lizard, Metal Overlord, and Mephiles. What do these villains have in common except being cool in my opinion? They are 3 really dope villains that barely get any spotlight. The Bio-Lizard was my least favorite boss fight out of the 4 in this game, simply due to the lower excitement that I got compared to the others. Also, it's just disgusting to look at if you ask me. Metal Overlord at second because if all the later stage, if it wasn't then, it would probably be with the joint first group. Mephiles and Devil Doom. The reason why I put them joint first is because they are both equally sick looking in my opinion. Mephiles is an extremely powerful villain who was the only one to kill Sonic, and his design looked so awesome. Plus the dialogue that went into this boss I just really enjoyed because it was referencing 06 a lot, which I hope we get a remake one day because I really want one. I know it's a controversial opinion, but I don't care at this point. And then Doom, and again at joint first, which he was an amazing boss here. He had 3 phases, one on water, one on goop, and one in the air. Now, let me just say, we have never seen anything like this in such high quality. I literally felt like I was driving a plane when doing this boss, which is just so cool because I've never got to play a Sonic game that has done this. Plus, his design, still really gross, looks awesome. The Doom Starfish acts as the eye of this monstrosity as he transforms into his new forms. We have to defeat him in this city illusion as Shadow the Hedgehog in the air with sick music in such a high quality and fighting for such a great story that this game has told. Now you may be wondering why I even put Mephiles with Doom, and that is because while I don't know everything about 06, I do know that he is personally my favourite villain in the entire Sonic series hands down. And what makes all these bosses unique is the additional powers that Shadow gets to use throughout the games. The Doom powers were a huge selling point of this game, and most of them did not disappoint. The Doom Spears multiplies Shadow's projectiles Chaos Spear by 5, and allows for some puzzles and multiple enemy takes out, which is very helpful if I actually remember it. The Doom Blast is also really helpful because you can now actually do traversal and combat moves at the same time, by launching an enemy somewhere and then teleporting them into the ground then somewhere else. I used this whenever I had the opportunity because it unlocked so many shortcuts. Doom Wings though weren't as great for me because they weren't really easy to use in my opinion. I couldn't figure out how I could get rid of them when I wanted. I lost rings because of it, and we couldn't actually fly, we can only glide, though I wouldn't deny that it did make some levels easier to traverse than others. Doom Surf was my favourite after the first year, I said, because we couldn't go in water normally, and it allows some pretty fun level mechanic later on in the game. And finally Doom Morph, which was my least favourite because it was very messy to use. To activate it you have to find a blue glob ball, and then you can attack and then you turn into the morph form, but then you have to only go onto the slippery surface to use it, and you can also rope swim, which just seemed clunky to me, and if you go off the purple goo you get stuck, so you have to find another blob ball, which is really annoying. Though I did like the whole getting through the fencing mechanic that was utilised with it. But I have to mention Chaos Control as well, because this mechanic added a whole new depth for platforming and speedrunning to the game. It's a slow-mo feature that also stops the clock, so there may even be shorter times than before. It's pretty much needed in every level, which allows for some puzzles and some really cool scenes, and all these are used in most of the new levels. In the original Sonic Generations, I believe that the levels in it were a major factor on why I was successful. I mean, you've got City Escape, Speedway Highway, Crisis City, Rooftop Run, Planet Wisp, and everyone's most loved and hated level, Green Hill.
What?
However, Shadow Generations has 5 worlds for the games that didn't get a chance to shine in the original generations, and for games that definitely contributed a lot to Shadow's story. Heroes, Forces, Frontiers, and 06, and of course 2 levels from the adventure games make a comeback, with my favourite being Sunset Heights. I have to admit, out of all the levels that we saw in the trailer, I was most excited for Sunset Heights. We finally got to see what Forces level, best level, reimagined in such good spotlight. You just have to say that the light and reflection on the water just looks so good when you look at it. However, I will say that the other levels were done justice as well, especially Rail Canyons from Heroes, which again just looked breathtaking. Visuals aside though, my favourite thing about these levels were they were long. The last mainline Sonic game that had stages had levels that lasted 57 seconds long, and they were easy. One of the stages in this game took me 8 minutes to complete, and I was quite angry and happy when I realised that this game was actually going to offer a challenge. I will mention though that I was really happy also when I realized that the new controls were reversible to the OG gen controls, so you don't have to live with the Frontiers control scheme if you don't want to. As I mentioned in the beginning, Generations is one of my personal favourites of mine, and the community it seems, when it comes to the mainline Sonic games. And even though it had a dreadful story, the gameplay was pretty great if we discount modern Sonic slipperiness. This remaster, unlike a last few, didn't seem to have any glitches of some sort, and maybe I was tripping when I say that I'm pretty sure both Sonics are a tiny bit faster. Maybe I say that because there is a much higher frame rate, though because this game has been boosted to a high FPS, it does make it look like faster, and it was also upscaled to a very high definition, something that is definitely needed a lot of Sonic games, hint hint Sega. Other than that, many quality of life changes were made, like the save files, the addition of new controls for Frontiers players, and redubbed voice lines to make things interesting, which I found very odd seeing that this game also now have lore and references in it. As for new content, I believe that the Chow were the only new thing in this game. They're hidden around levels for us to collect, and I have to say that I was struggling to find them when going fast, but if you decide to walk, they're a lot easier to find, plus they hang around in the hub world. As much as I have nostalgia for the OG generations, Shadow takes the cake with this one for me, because it's visually more appealing, the stories are compelling and emotional, the bosses are a lot more fun, and there is a lot more game variety, and it just seems that it brought everything good about base generations into it. I'm not saying it's my favourite because it's new, but simply because it's just, I think it's a better game, but also a shorter game. And if we're on the topic of Sonic vs Shadow, I will bring up one cutscene in Shadow Generations that recreated the Shadow boss in base generations, and this is everything I've wanted, though I am annoyed that we didn't get a Sonic boss. This cutscene was sick and was everything I wanted from Sonic game, and with that I believe that I can fully say that we have gotten a good Sonic game at last. Not great, but actually incredible, glorious, and any other synonyms that you can think of that relate to great. Make sure to comment any thoughts that you had below about this game, and I'm going to get back to 100% in this game. And make sure to subscribe, like, and I'll see you all next time with my first ever playthrough review of Sonic Adventure.